East, the changes in the Middle East come out right. Even though we understand them pretty well, we certainly try to understand them pretty well. I've just returned from my 4th trip to Cairo in the last 18 months, and I know that the largest contingent of Yala leaders is from Egypt. And Hala just returned from Jordan. Even though we try to understand things well, we know that that having them turn out well is going to be up to you, not up to us. And it's going to be up to the kinds of relationships you forge and the courage that you have that's going to make them come out right. We think that ground truth really matters, what people on the ground see, not what we see from Washington. And you are the ground truth, or you're certainly part of the ground truth. There are others who are currently perhaps in bigger positions of leadership or bigger roles in academia. But the people on the ground who are going to make the connections, that are going to make the changes, are you and the people who come after you. And as young as you are, there are people even younger than you who are going to be part of that change. So just a few months ago, the Wilson Center hosted a meeting entitled Unwilling to Wait: Why Activists Are Taking the Initiative on the Peace Process. And it featured 2 youth activists from One Voice Palestine and One Voice Israel. I think, I know they think, and I think, and I have this conversation with my friend Aaron all the time, that there will be a success, that the peace process will successfully conclude. I think it will successfully conclude because it has to successfully conclude. I don't think either side has a better option. And although the leaders on each side have all kinds of reasons why they want to delay the solution, I think that the people in the end, especially the younger people, will push it through. And if I weren't an optimist, I would have never have served in our Congress for 9 terms, which is a very, very long time. It was 17 years. And so I just want to say that it's an honor for me to come down here and to welcome 2 leaders who make a big difference from the Yala young leaders. One of them is Ahmadi Jaber, who's a Palestinian-American student at the College of San Mateo in my home state of California. And the other is Nimrod Ben-Zayev, who is an Israeli student of Middle Eastern and African history at Tel Aviv University. I also want to give a special shout out to Aaron Miller, who has been a scholar here for 6 years, who worked for, I think it's six secretaries of state so far, and who is now also our vice president for new initiatives. A new initiative to put on Aaron's plate is making the peace process successful, Aaron. And you're just the young guy who can pull it off. And Aaron is moderating today's conversation, but it's one that you will all participate in. And I just, again, want to say that this initiative here means a lot to me personally. It means a lot to us at the Wilson Center, and I think it means a lot to the outcome of the peace process. And so please come back often. We will do everything we can to help your group be successful, but also to help make the cause of peace successful. Thank you very much.
Jane, thank you. I just want to begin with a story because it encapsulates and summarizes everything that I believe and continue to believe. A week or so before, and I've written about this, but it's important to repeat it, I think, because of Mahdi and Nimrod. A week before the ill-fated Camp David summit convened in July of 2000, with the best of intentions and purposes, I got a phone call from my good friend John Wallach, who had been diagnosed with the lung cancer that would ultimately kill him 2 years later. And John pleaded with me, as he often did, to convince Secretary Albright and President Clinton that as a part of the Camp David summit, which was literally days away from convening, we had to include young Israelis and Palestinians in order to present to the leaders, to try to persuade them what the stakes were. It wasn't about politics, it wasn't about narrow political future, careers, it was about the future. And I listened very patiently to John. John was relentless and inexhaustible and a dreamer and a visionary. He created an organization, Seeds of Peace, which I ran for 3 years, which is about saving the world one person at a time, which is not the ideal way to do it, but in the absence of governments being willing to do it, it's a noble and ennobling cause. I listened very patiently to John, knowing that I would never convey his request to either the Secretary of State or the President. And it's something that I regret to this day, because in the end, we say we do, but we really don't take a younger generation as seriously as we must. We say we do. We really do. We invest in education and in the future, but I wonder if we really do. It's our time. We occupy a narrow niche as adults, and we have persuaded ourselves that it is our time and only our time. It's a wrong-headed conclusion. This organization, Yellow Young Leaders, that we are honored to be the Washington partners of, and Ben Perry will be the Washington representative for this organization, is strategic. It's not for dreamers, and it's generational. It reflects the fact that I agree with Jane. A two-state solution will come. The question is when and over what period of time. And it's worth not waiting and investing in the future. And it's important to me, and it remains important to me. So I'm really thrilled and honored that both of you, I'm honored to be sitting in the middle of, between the two of you, which I did for many years. I don't do that anymore, but I still believe in this. So, Mahdi, let's begin with you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us, and thank you to the Woodrow Center for having us especially. As everyone said, I'm Mahdi Jabir. I'm Palestinian-American. I would first off like to just start off by saying, everyone asks, what is Yalla? Well, Yalla Young Leaders is it was started by the Paris Center for Peace in Yalla, Palestine. Is a Facebook movement that was for dialogue and well, initially was for dialogue online and just to have Arabs and Israelis, specifically Palestinians, Israelis talking to each other, getting to know each other. But as many of you know, everyone who has Facebook, there's hundreds and hundreds of pages like this. But what stood out to me for me being here was I one day was on Facebook and I happened just to bump onto this page, and I just seen Israelis and Palestinians and people commenting and talking. It was the first time in my life that I saw an Israeli who was willing to listen to what a Palestinian living in the West Bank had to say. I seen Israelis who were coming to the page without any restrictions, who were opening to listening, and as were Palestinians towards the Israelis. And I think that's what made this different to me and what made me feel comfortable being a Palestinian American joining this. Because as many of you know, there's a big anti-normalization thing in the Arab world, but this is by far has nothing to do with that. I felt completely comfortable in wanting to join this for many reasons. And so as we started off just as a Facebook page, we grew and we realized that it was not only for Palestinian Israelis, but it's a cross-regional movement for anyone from Tunis to Yemen to Libya to Lebanon. We all have different backgrounds, different religions, different worldviews, but what brought us together on the page is that everyone wanted a job, everyone wanted economic, stability, political stability. So that by far pushes anything else to the side. Just that, I don't care if you're an Israeli, I don't care if you're a Tunisian, the fact that I can't get a job and there's people who have degrees and they can't get jobs in the Middle East. This was a big deal to everyone, and this is what made us realize that we need to make this a cross-regional movement. And today, thank God it is. We have 365,000 members in every Middle Eastern, North African country. 230,000 people see our content daily. 2.3 million a month see yellow-related content. When people ask what we do, are we just a Facebook page? Are we just people talking online? In the beginning, that's all we could do. But as we've grown, as we've matured, and we've had people in Washington help us, we've pushed for meetings between Israelis and Palestinians. Israelis going to Ramallah, and although it's more hard, we try having Palestinians going into Israel, and it helps. And so we are having real interaction. It's not just online, and we have Israelis and Palestinians seeing each other bi-weekly, sometimes monthly. When it's hard. But as we've moved on, we've with the help of others, are starting up Yellow Young Leaders Online Academy, which is the first cross-regional academy for anyone in the MENA region. As we were going, we asked surveys for people on our online. What do you think would benefit you in your country? What's most dire to you that you need? And we set up a survey, and surprisingly, most people that replied and did the survey, they want jobs in economic reform, business and technology, jobs for the future. They're really eager young people just wishing to have a good job, a good life, and we received a lot of positive feedback. And today, thank God, the online academy is up and running. We've had our first year as a test year, but it's doing good. We have, correct me if I'm wrong, 100, I think 30 Palestinians, 30 Israelis.
That depends on which program. I'll get to the
There's a couple programs, but we have the online academy. What makes it special is because I know there's a lot of Coursera and stuff like that, but what makes this special is that Israelis and Palestinians have to talk to each other during these online courses. And everyone that's involved, you have to talk and you have to communicate, and that's what makes this a little different, and that's what makes it more humanistic, is just knowing that you guys are both working towards the same thing, and if you're an Israeli or a Palestinian, it doesn't matter, you're working to get a certificate. So in that sense, it's very special and it's very different. I would also just like to add that, a lot of people ask me, it's easy for you because you live in America, you're an American Palestinian. And that's very much true, but we have our members in the West Bank, surprisingly, are very much optimistic and very, very into Yallah. And it's not just something that they like on Facebook. It's something that they're eager to see. And we've had, with the help of the State Department, thankfully, we've had our, what is the initiative, the MLC initiative that was held in the Middle East, and we've had Israelis and Palestinians and Jordanians all attend. And what the benefit of that was, we've seen that towards the end, no one cared what the other person was. It was just the fact that we're all coming here for a sake of pushing our region towards a more positive and more stable region. And when it comes down to it, surprisingly, this doesn't get said a lot, but most Middle Easterners rather just have, the stability and the reassurance that they can have, and they're smart enough and more than capable of having these things, But we just have political, chaos, as you could say, and it doesn't, The one thing I really just want to let you guys, make sure you understand is that there are so many, as was stated, 100,000 Egyptians on our page, which I'm really proud of after the revolution. Before the revolution, if that hadn't happened, I don't think we would have had even a couple thousand. But now that people are feeling free and people are feeling, they're not scared to join something that does have an Israeli connection. It's to me, that's what made me feel really positive, and to know that this is, a cross-regional movement that for once, I think people in the Middle East are agreeing on something, that this, it can only do good, and I hope I've relayed to that to you guys. Thank you.
Monty, thank you very much.
Thank
Right.
you. Thanks very much, Jane, Madi, Aaron. Thank you again for having us. I know that it's customarily good advice to start speaking with an anecdote. So I'm going to start speaking with what I think is a non-anecdotal anecdote. I think it's extremely it's the core of the issue. Initially, and I have to thank Madi twice for this, because initially Madi was not supposed to come here. I was supposed to be coming with a Palestinian partner of mine who's the co-coordinator of the Yalla core group. The core group is a group of 150 people from across the region who determine how exactly Yalla looks, what it says, what we talk about. They're the ones calling the shots on Yalla. And they're from across the region. And my co-coordinator is a young Palestinian woman named Uhud. And she, a couple of days before our flight, she became ill. And she couldn't travel. What's more, she couldn't walk. She had to get to the hospital. And to get decent treatment, you don't really look for that in Ramallah. So you have to go to East Jerusalem. And to get to East Jerusalem, you have to go through a checkpoint. But you can't not walk through a checkpoint. So she took a taxi up to the checkpoint. She went through the checkpoint with the help of people who were around her, who basically helped carry her through the checkpoint. She got in another taxi, and she got to the hospital, where she was treated, and she was released today, so everything's fine. But the point is that when I spoke to her when she got to the hospital, and she's termed that day, I think, one of the worst days of her life. But the first thing she said was, "I still want to go. I'm going with you to Washington." And are you sure? I mean, what does the doctor say? I told him I have to go. He's gonna work around that. So, unfortunately, she couldn't be here. But I think the reason I'm saying it's non-anecdotal is because that's what Yalla is about. It's about people in the region who are taking everything that comes with being a Middle Easterner, whether it's a Palestinian or Israeli, or Egyptian, or from across the region, really, their harsh experiences as a young person. It's taking those and trying to make the best out of all of them, trying to really get the most positive spin on things that you can. And so she said, "I'm going to write an article about this. I'm going to write. That's what I'm going to do with this day." And I was not surprised, but once again astounded. Which leads to another point. Yalla is about its members. I mean, there's the Paris Center for Peace and Yalla Palestine who have served to set up the movement. We're thankful to have the Woodrow Wilson Center now helping us consolidate our presence here by partnering with us in DC. But it really is about the people, about those 365,000 and what they're able and what they're willing and what they want to do. They shape it. And if we're talking about creating positive change in the Middle East, that's hard to pin exactly what is positive. It's what they deem positive. We're not making anything that isn't there with Yalla, and you can't do that. I mean, the notion that you can supplant a future into a region is completely ridiculous. What we're doing is we're taking what they want and we're amplifying it. We're serving as a platform for them to express what their vision is, what they want for the region, what they want for themselves. And as Mahdi pointed out, economy is a huge part of it, that education is a huge part of it, and the notion that you can have a reasonable life, you can have a normal, quote, normal life in the Middle East, whether you're Palestinian, Israeli, Egyptian, Lebanese, and I'm willing to say even at this point in time, whether you're Syrian or Yemeni, you are fully entitled to expect and to demand to have a normal life. And that's what these people are doing. That's what Yalla members are doing on a day-to-day basis. And because it's so closely linked to the members, it also changes with time. We started out with, I think, 300 members on Facebook. And when you have 300 people, you need to create content. As time passes, we don't so much create content, we just sponsor or show the content that's being created. So almost everything you see, whether it's on through academy students, the academy that Mahdi mentioned, and I'll go back to our partners in that because they're important a little bit later. Academy students giving their input, their thoughts, their ideas, their products from what they're learning and sharing it with the community, or a platform that we started which is titled Yala Media Cafe. I'll get back to the students. Which is basically a blog. It's on Facebook, and it features these stories from these people on a daily basis, touching on everything. And we like to think of it as sort of adding a human aspect to coverage of the Middle East, so to speak. So you're covering people's lives. You're not just covering political changes, shifts. You're covering how people actually experience them, and that's different. And there are variations between the people, which are huge. Even if they're at the same time in Tahrir Square, they all experience it differently. We're trying to get those small personal experiences out there through this. And since it's all the people, it's going to be a lot of faces here. These are 3 of our students. I won't read the quotes because you can read them behind me. But these are just examples of 3 of the students that we have in the academy who found Yalla. We didn't find them. We have no way of finding them. These people stumbled upon Yalla. And each one of them is astounding. From, there's a famous Nasserist kind of phrase, from the ocean to the Gulf. So Yalla's reenacting that just a little differently. From the ocean to the Gulf. Each one of them is amazing. And they're bringing with them, whether it's presidents of NGOs or PhD students or high school students, they're astounding people. And we're very lucky to have them with us. Which brings me to another thing. What are we doing for these people? What are we doing with these people? What are they doing? So they're studying together, which, as Mahdi pointed out, is extremely important and extremely unique. But they're also advocating. We have education on one hand and advocacy on the other. Obviously, in Washington, you should speak about advocacy. We created a peace initiative in August 2012. We met 16 members who were present and 2 members who couldn't come because they couldn't get a visa, a Sudanese member and a Kuwaiti member, but who were involved in the discussions online. And we formulated what I think still is the only peace initiative entirely created by young people from the region. And it touches upon everything. And we sent it out to practically every major player. And actually, not everyone was courteous enough to respond, but there were responses. So we're touching upon every issue, whether it's the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the 2-state solution as a priority, or whether it's different issues which are at the core of it. If it's ethnic and sectarian and national violence, we had an Iraqi member present who thought that was extremely important, emphasizing because of Iraq's nature. Equality and human rights, I think, goes without saying at this point. Gender equality, and again, this is sort of a, this might give the wrong impression. Yalla is not about men in suits. I don't even know I don't know how to wear this thing. It's a clip-on. No, we're 50% of our core group are women, and the leadership on a day-to-day basis, I think would be fair to say, is actually a majority of young women rather than young men. The demographic of the entire 365,000 is skewed towards more men, but in terms of the leadership, we are very careful and very mindful of how important that is if we want to create change in the region, because that is, again, that's the heart of the issue. Higher education is obviously part of the Yala Academy, but also calling for higher education in general, improving higher education throughout the region, and not just kind of having degrees which then you do nothing with, because no matter how good it is, there's no job afterwards. So that goes on to economic stability and economic change, which is something that we're actually trying to engage with now. And other than that, we do several peace conferences online each year. We do at least one, which is annual, and we did an online inauguration for the academy, which was also online. This is where we get to have like cool things because we're online. We have a platform called Shaker, which gives you the small figurine which you can just walk around an open space with and chat with people and order each other lemonade and whatever, and it gives a very human experience to interaction, not just exchanging text messages. So we had the next president-elect, the president-elect of Princeton, come to that environment and give an inauguration speech, which was very special for all of the people who were there. We also created a gender equality declaration, which was drafted by 10 of our members and was then dispersed throughout the community. And we're actually being helped by the actor Sharon Stone with the gender equality issues and with the Academy as well. And we also, as Madi pointed out, make a point of meeting a lot, as much as we can. Obviously, that's limited, and even that's not easy to Israelis and Palestinians on a regular basis, but the State Department is enabling something wider to happen late in October, hopefully, which is what Madi mentioned, the Men of Leaders for Change. It's a program within the Academy which brings together 120 people from across the region, 150, sorry, 100 of which will be attending a meeting in Jordan, in the Dead Sea, which will be, for a lot of them, the first time they see an Israeli, the first time they see an Israeli sees or meets a Palestinian or a Jordanian or a Saudi, and then they're all there. They're all part of that program, which is fantastic. And I want to focus on the people again, because that's what's important. Well, that's what's really important. So this is a Hud. I mentioned her already. She was supposed to be here. These are sort of snippets of statements that we took from the members. And these are the people that make Yala work. It wouldn't have reached 365,000 without them. It wouldn't have reached anything without them. They're the reason they keep astounding us every single day. And they really are the heart of it. I think that before I conclude, I think that it's really important to understand that when we started out, we had the Paris Center for Peace, which I am an employee of, and we had no ability to employ Palestinians because the Yalla Palestine, the NGO, was a one-man operation with no budget. And through the help of the State Department and the project that they funded, we are able now to have a team of 4 working on the ground in the West Bank. That is immensely important. That changed things a great deal. It gives you the ability to interact not just with people who we're identified with, but they're working there. They're part of it. They're Palestinians who are Yalla staff. That made a huge difference. That made a huge difference with our presence there. And I think that the dream would be to have a group of people like that connecting through Yalla in every Middle Eastern country. I think that would be immense, and that could break, I think, a lot of barriers. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Nimrod, thank you. This is Yalla's first introduction to Washington. They have a series of meetings over the next couple of days which would rival any visiting dignitaries. And the point of this is station identification, truly. I also want to introduce Zinat Rahman, who is Secretary of State's Special Representative for Global Youth. And she's a very important piece of this whole equation. Because if it's true that governments can do transactional diplomacy, they can end conflict, they can negotiate, They can actually even consummate peace treaties. That's only part of it. It's the transformational piece that needs to accompany the transaction, which is changing attitudes and behaviors among people. I mean, John Wallach said it 20 years ago. Governments negotiate peace or treaties. People make peace. So I want to thank both of you. It was terrific. And I think we'll just go to your questions. If you could just identify yourselves. And yes, there is a mic which is coming.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Saba Ahmed, and I do lobbying work at Capitol Hill for various issues. First of all, I really wanted to thank you for doing this, and it was so interesting strategically. You both have so historical names, Mahdi and Nimrud. It just struck me the first time I saw it, Mahdi versus Nimrud. I hope that peace will continue, and you are the future. I would encourage you guys to get more involved with like lobbying work, especially because I think the voice of youth is missing in that aspect, and that's where we really need to change the conversation. Just wanted to find out if there is anything that you're doing with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and if Yalla is involved with that, or I'd love to see you guys come testify next time at those hearings as well. So thank you.
Wa alaikum assalam. It's definitely on our agenda. It's definitely there. We also, we're looking deeply to stay in Washington if and when it's Yalla USA will have an office here, hopefully, inshallah, and that will help us greatly with being connected to Congress, and hopefully this is very in the future, but just to say it, friends of Yalla in Congress, that's the hope, and to have that, to be there, but to have that, we'll have to have Yalla USA, which is coming. So it's in the process. But if you want to elaborate on that,
We're actually our first introduction to the Hill will be later today. We're meeting with Representative Ellison and with Representative Waxman later today. So that's kind of our first foray into that. But you're obviously absolutely right. That's extremely important, and we're also happy to hear any suggestions, ideas on how that can be best done. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much both for sharing a little bit about Yalla. My name is Sarah Sladen, and I'm with Interaction, where I direct the Alliance for International Youth Development. And I first heard, Aaron, you speak about transformational and transactional diplomacy and peace at Seeds of Peace in 2003 and 2004 when I was working as a counselor. And that was really before the emergence of many of these social media platforms. I think they were just coming up, but they hadn't really been utilized as much for this kind of grassroots organization. I was curious to hear your thoughts about what's changed in terms of translating these online conversations and engagement into on-the-ground actualization and face-to-face meetings, because I know Seeds of Peace over the years, as the context on the ground has shifted, has encountered many of the same challenges in terms of bringing Israelis and Palestinians together. And so the online platforms have emerged as a very exciting and interesting space for those young people, and similarly for yours as well. So be interested to hear your thoughts about that and maybe what's changed for you over the past few years, Aaron, as well. Thanks.
I mean, obviously, the situation has deteriorated and has made practical engagement much harder. Seeds has gone into unilateral as opposed to bilateral programming, in which they work within Israeli communities and within Palestinian communities and to kind of self-actualize. And a lot of this really is about identity. It's about expanding identity within Israelis and Palestinians. I just think that the practical problems have made even more urgent the success of creating safe, neutral, virtual space. And it's not ideal. It may be ideal because it can reach thousands, but what you lose in the thousands, you gain in the intimate interactions between individuals. I mean, and I mean, one additional point, I have been off, Siege is an extraordinary organization, and it continues to prosper. And I have to say that the notion that you can bring Israelis and Palestinians from a conflict region, put them together in a experience in safe, neutral space for a period of 3 weeks. The first night, you talk to them in the morning, and you ask them, Israelis and Palestinians, young men and women, how did you sleep? And some of them say, not well. And then you pursue and ask them why. Are you homesick? Are you ill? No. Well, then why didn't you sleep? We didn't sleep because we were afraid. Well, what were you afraid of? That harm would come to us in the middle of the night. Think about it. Harm would come to us in the middle of the night from the so-called other, from the enemy, the adversary with no face. And within 3 weeks, they are in open mourning, grieving, because they realize that they are going from the future back to the past. And these are authentic Israelis and Palestinians who, in the end, make room. They don't give up their national identity or the fight, but they make room in their own narratives for the narrative of the other. And that's, in part, what is going on here as well. The notion that Israelis and Palestinians really don't know one another, which is the conventional notion among the peacemakers, is true. The other logic is that they know each other only too well. And that narrative, it's trying to find the balance between those two processes of discovery. So it's been rough, I think, for these organizations. But the urgency and the need has grown much more intense as a consequence.
If
I agree.
If I could just one small comment to add to that, I'd say a big difference with having social media as opposed to just a couple years back is the humanization effect taking place online. The fact that you see an Israeli talking about FIFA or Barcelona, like, hey, I like that team too. It's small things that otherwise a Palestinian would never know about an Israeli. For the longest time, even I, who've grown up in America, when I thought Israeli, I think of a guy wearing an IDF uniform, banging on my door, trying, with asking for a permit. And, these are things that are lodged into your head as a national narrative when you grow up. And to see, these just chip that away piece by piece and to see that, really the fact that Israelis and Palestinian, especially the kids, have so much in common, growing up. And hopefully, fear and ostracization won't be part of that soon. But I think for the greatest thing, the thing I love about it, and I'll probably never get sick of it, is when I see online, like an Arab and a Jew, when they finally get on there and they finally, because, we do have people coming, and as we call them in the, internet world, we call them trolls. But, we do have people, obviously not everyone's for it. There are people who come with a negative intention, but what keeps me going is when I see someone in Beit Lahem or Nablus, really trying to get to know an Israeli in Tel Aviv, and once they make that connection, and once you don't think of it as a Palestinian just wearing a keffiyeh, and you don't think of an Israeli just wearing his army suit, it really takes an effect on you, and I think that's a big thing that I loved about it, and that's only because of the internet we have that.
Just one more point regarding the face-to-face. As Aaron pointed out, that is difficult logistically, but we still make a point of doing it, and we do it as often as we can, whether it's visiting, and it's interesting because there is a sense there is somewhat of a symmetry in that, because you need permits to go anywhere. Whether you're an Israeli going into Ramallah or a Palestinian going into Israel, you need a permit. You need to ask someone to let you in or let you out. But we do that. We do that as often as we can. I think that makes a huge difference. I mean, even the students that have just recently joined the Yala Academy because they wanted to take an online course in business or whatever, they've also found themselves joining those meetings. We just had a meeting on the 24th of May in Jerusalem, in the America Center, in East Jerusalem, and which was fantastic. We had 7 new people from the Palestinian side, 5 new Israelis come, and that was, it's great. It's mind-blowing to see when that happens, how good it is. And this relates in a way to what Aaron mentioned about identities. I think one of the points that also needs to be made is that Yala offers an identity of sorts to people because it's day to day, it's daily, it's all the time, it's on your Facebook, it's what you... I never had Facebook before Yala. I don't necessarily love the platform in terms of having, my social interactions there. But it's completely changed my life since Yala came in. And it's become an organic part of it. I check it. I have conversations on a daily basis with people. I have friends who I know everything about, and they know everything about me, way beyond dialogue and conflict. And what that does is it creates a different image altogether of what it is about being part of the Middle East, what it means to be Moroccan or Tunisian or Algerian or Libyan or any of those in relation to how the region looks, because you think of yourself differently. And it's the sort of the day-to-day things that really stand out to me. A couple of weeks ago, one of our Tunisian members posted a question. Can anyone help me with my CV? Like on this Yala platform. What does that mean? But that's exactly it. That is the normality, the normal sense of having connections across borders, which you can ask to help with your CV, or you can ask for advice on something that's completely not related because you feel comfortable with them, because you know they are no longer just the other. And that's the strongest point, I think, that in terms of what we're doing.
Yes.
My name is Stephen Duckworth, and I'm really stunned and amazed that you guys are making this effort to bring about peace in such a contentious region. And I would like to really say that I think that your work is important, and I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
I would like to know, how have the members responded to Palestine's change of status within the United Nations? I would also like to know how members have suggested to bring about a resolution between Iran and Israel.
Well, I'll talk about the UN bid. First and foremost, I personally, not a part of Yalla, but I personally was very much for it, because anything I think that diplomatic or nonviolent, it's peaceful, I'm all for it, and I think that's exactly what the UN bid was. But also, that's neither here nor there. That everyone has an opinion on it. But when that was coming up to it, me and Nimrod were actually together. We were in Washington, and we were posting a lot. And Yalla was asking, the Palestinian members, what do you think about it? What do you think it'll actually do on the ground, though? And that's one thing is yes, you can have an upgrade at the UN, but in the end of the day, it's not going to be the UN. It's going to be Israelis and Palestinians working together for that, because, as we've moved up, but that doesn't mean there's not an occupation. That doesn't mean that for me to go from here to just 1 kilometer away, it takes an hour and a half. It doesn't take that, it doesn't change the status quo. And that's one thing that is unfortunate about it, that I think we can't wait on UN bodies. We need to be proactive ourselves in working with each other to push that and to change our future. I think, but one more thing is, as it was coming up, a lot of our Palestinian members were excited. A lot, it's in the same period of time we had a lot of people coming in saying, "Oh, look at you! You guys are working with Israelis. You're not doing much. You should be supporting the UN bid." There's opinions all over the place, but for the most part, it was a positive thing. But I'll just say that I think not to show off, but I think what we're doing actually, makes a difference, because the UN bid, you ask anyone in Palestine, it has not changed one single thing for their lives. It hasn't. That's the sad part. And I'll just end on that note.
It's a good note to end on. I think, Aaron's been repeatedly telling us that this whole thing is about addition rather than subtraction in terms of how we posit ourselves vis-a-vis events. So we need to be very careful how we treat everything. So we need to treat things even-handedly to an extent. So the UN bid, although many of us personally sympathized with it and thought that it was a good move in the sense that it was a diplomatic move, that it was a move that happens in a peaceful manner, still falls under unilateral moves. Now, if we are opposing unilateral moves, we probably should oppose all unilateral moves. So we found ourselves in the situation of saying, we do believe that there needs to be a Palestinian state. We are absolutely for it. We are not sure that this is the best way of getting there. So that was sort of the Yalla opinion on the matter. With regards to Iran and Israel, that's not something that comes up an awful lot because the nature is that it's mostly the Arab Middle East and Israelis. However, when it does come up, people are really, really scared. I mean, people are frightened from across the region. They are worried. They have a feeling that this is completely out of their control, unlike other things, which they do have some impact on. But no one, I think, no one has expressed his or her support for any sort of violence as a solution for this. And I think that's sort of the Yalla stance on things in general. We do not support violence. It does not answer, whether it's state violence or non-state violence, it never gets the result that you're looking for.
Yes. No, I'm sorry. I'm not being very specific. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Really very impressed with what is going on and just delighted. I've had the privilege to be involved in something called the International Youth Foundation, which is all about youth employability, and also the first advisory board to the Perez Center. But the bottom line is, as Mahdi made his presentation, it was about the common desire on the part of everyone in Yala and all they represent for jobs. And I guess I would just encourage you, when you think about jobs, there are only three places the jobs can be found: government jobs, micro-enterprise, and the private sector. And I think you have done the kind of work that will appeal to some private sector young leadership. And I just would encourage you through the core group or the academy to reach out to something like the International Young Presidents Organization with your story, just to demonstrate that people can work together. And the fact is that there are many places now, in Africa, for example, that there is a need for young workers working together, the ability to work together, not to be concerned that there will be conflicts. And I just think you got a great story, and I think you ought to reach out to the private sector as well and tell them some of that story. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you very much. It's an amazing idea.
Yeah, my name is Francesca Barogno. I'm an Italian journalist based here in DC. And, well, of course, I'm also very impressed by your project. And I wonder if there is a special place for women in this project. I mean, do they play a special role in this moment? Because I think
Do you want to?
You said a special role in Yalla in general?
yeah, in Yale. I mean, if there is a special attention and if there is a special role in Yale, yes.
Yes, well, as many of you know, the status of women in the Middle East needs to change, and that's something that's on Yalla's agenda all the time. The status of women from Palestine to Tunisia, all across the board. And as we stated, we're very proud that we do have most of our core group are women that are advocating. And I just want to tell a little story that it stayed with me for a long time. Was we had a young Saudi woman who was part of Yalla, only strictly online. She wouldn't do video. She wouldn't even show her real picture or name, because for her it was a problem. And she would message and ask, what's the status of women outside of Saudi Arabia? What's the status of women in countries next to me? The fact that she was interested in realizing that this is not normal, my situation, the status of women in not just her country, but our region as a whole. And the fact that she's reaching out and wanting to just see that there can be a change. And, but the only thing was that it was for her at the moment, it was too dangerous and for her to be involved with us. But so she did subside. But what stayed with us is that she was looking for a change. She was looking for something different. And, I think a lot of the women in Yalla, Israeli or Palestinian or not, that they're looking for not just, to fight, the extreme religious, but to have women be in governmental positions and to be in high stake jobs. And it's coming. It's in the process. But there's not to say that we don't have a lot of work to do when it comes to women. We're always open to it, and we realize that we do need that. But it's a hard kind of to give you a concrete answer on that one.
I think I'll disagree with you on that, because I think to the question, what is the place of women in the movement? Is there a special role? The answer is absolutely yes. There is, because first of all, I think we've found in time that women are, and I don't want to offend anyone, but are altogether more courageous than men, and they're, at least from our experience, a lot braver in taking upon themselves the risks that it entails to call for change, and they're doing it through Yalla a lot. And we think that gender equality, again, this is not exactly the best, but we think that gender equality is absolutely crucial if anything is to happen in the Middle East, and meaningful gender equality, not just the ability to drive or to vote, but really meaningful. And we try to have that impact everything we do, literally everything. So there's a gendered perspective on everything we go through. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we have time for a question or two more. Do you not?
Thanks, Aaron. Welcome to DC, Nimrod Mahdi, and I will say you should show off the whole time you're here, because that's part of why you're here. And voices like yours don't get heard as often as they should. In the office that I run at the State Department, I think we're focused across the board to empower young change agents throughout society, economically, politically, civically. And so you're a great example, obviously for us, of how we play a supporting role to you having the starring role. I think a lot of times millennials are given the reputation of being slacktivists or apathy, having apathy, really looking at the great global challenges. One of my challenges is changing the frame from seeing young people as a problem or just these passive kind of consumers of culture to actually being these change agents, which they are, who I meet all around the world. And so I want you to speak to that. How do you kind of, because I actually don't think it's about apathy. I think it's people's core belief of that they don't believe that their participation or their action can solve kind of these really big problems. And even if we're not looking at Middle East peace, but talking about the economic issues that exist or any number of challenges that exist in many societies, how do you bridge that gap to have somebody believe, any of these guys, that their actions, what they're doing, their participation can impact their lives and more broadly these big policy issues?
That's a really good question. We try to, because as I said, what we're doing is we're amplifying their voices. We're making them louder, and we're getting them heard. We try to make it very clear to them that people are listening, and if they're not listening yet, we're going to try and get them to listen. So one thing that motivates is knowing that you're working on something, you're working on an idea or a gender equality declaration, and knowing that that's going to be sent out and read and received by everyone who matters, everyone who really calls the shots, so to speak, in the big world, whether it's regional leadership or international leadership. And I think people get a clear sense that we are doing our best to get them heard. That's not enough entirely to bridge that gap. And so part of what we're working on now, and I mentioned this kind of in passing earlier, is exactly that economic issue. Not Middle East peace, noble a cause as it may be, and crucial a cause as it may be, but economic development and the question of resources. Where are all these resources going to in the Middle East? Whether it's water, which is lacking, or oil, which is abundant but not reaching the right people in terms of helping young people build their lives. So one of the things that we're going to try, and you'll hear more about this at the State Department, actually, so this is kind of a spoiler, is to... Great, so that's good, is to try and make the point that these people should be involved in the processes that shape the realities, because they can't, no one is within the illusion of that they are calling the shots, they are making the reality. They know that there are bigger actors, that there are people who are shaping the realities in the region, and it's the disconnect between them and those people which makes them feel vulnerable and weak even. So what we want to say is that there are thousands, tens of thousands, probably even hundreds of thousands, who have something to say, who can contribute to the processes that are shaping the region. And why can't the people shaping those processes reach out to them? Why can't they hear them out? We think they should. We think they have to. Because if you're developing a region or developing an economy based on no conversations with young people who are obviously going to be the people living in that economy later on and shaping it eventually, what are you doing it for? Who are you doing it for?
Power is diffused in the world today, but it still exists in important places. And I know Secretary Clinton understood this. When secretaries travel anywhere in this region, I would think part of their agenda must be directed toward civil society and specifically toward youth. It's critically important, not just for symbolic reasons, but for practical reasons. The issue of being heard is the best way to diffuse anger. It won't address grievance, but it will at least begin to start the kind of conversation that could address unfulfilled and unrequited requirements. That's really, really important. I know that Secretary Kerry understands this, and I think it's a critical thing to plan in the next couple of years. Listen, I think we've reached the end of our time. I can only say that takes more of these days to get me re-energized, but I am re-energized. I knew this would happen, and I'm re-energized because the two of you are truly inspiring. I mean, it's a painful journey. It's not an easy one, and you've made it, and I hope you can go on to inspire others. We have one-page handouts which conveniently summarize what Yalla is. If you cannot reach these two and you have suggestions for additional follow-up, there were at least 2 or 3 really good ones, you can contact Ben Perry, who is the local Yellow representative, or me here at the Wilson Center. But thank you all once again for coming.
Thank you very much.
Great.